Wow, I'm really honored to be here this morning. I I can't even imagine a pastor inviting someone who he's never heard speak uh, and allow him to come to his church when he's not even there. I mean, that is a man of great faith. You know, like wow. But we've met Pastor Bobby and now his wife, and just think they're amazing people. And I just connected with him. We just came in. Paula Harris is my cousin, and we just came by to visit her, and she said, "Well, I want you to meet my pastor," and we just kind of connected about I don't know a year ago, and so we're really grateful for that. And this church has already sent us a couple of really kind offerings and really blessed us in our ministry. Oh my! I'll just tell you, we're going to have to pray here, uh, which is a good thing, always, right? But when Pastor Bobby asked me to come preach about missions, I said, "What? How many days do I have?" You know, I mean, because it's my life, it's my passion, it's what I dream about. And so he said, "Well, maybe you could come more than once." But I'm gonna get you out of here before midnight for sure. Okay. Uh, so anyway, I do want to go to the Lord in prayer because honestly, I have about 7 great messages. I want to share all of them with you now. And so we're going to have to let him pick and choose what parts of those messages he'll have me share with you this morning. So, Father, I thank you so much for this church, for Life Church in Slater, Missouri. Father, I thank you for Pastor Bobby and his wife and their staff and this congregation. Father, I thank you that you're doing something new. It's a new thing you're doing here. And Father, we just thank you that for the opportunity to come and just bring glory and honor to you in your name, that Jesus may be lifted up in Slater and Marshall and this surrounding region. So we thank you this morning. Lord, take my words. You give me your words. You give me your heart, and you touch people's hearts this morning through this message in Jesus' mighty name. Oh, I feel like I'm at home because I am. Most of you wouldn't have a clue, but I'm probably kin to half of you. No, I'm related to the Harrises and Colemans and Kaisers and lots of people. I used to ride my little John Deere tractor, pedal power, up and down the street here. My grandmother lived about 2 blocks from here. Grandmother Coleman. My grandmother Harris also lived here, and my grandfather Johnny Harris, of course, lived out in the country. So anyway, I really do feel like I'm home. But I was raised in Waverly, and so that's not very far either. I was born in Marshall, and so none of that really makes any difference at all, does it? But other than it kind of connects us, so I'm not quite so much a stranger. Uh, I was a rodeo cowboy, moved to Texas. I was running from God, and met my beautiful wife in Texas, and somehow God brought her to live back in Waverly, Missouri with me several years ago, many years ago. I can't imagine now going from Houston, Texas, and living in Waverly, Missouri. She's really, my hat has always been off to her for that. She has an amazing story, amazing testimony. Maybe someday we'll be able to come and share that. She was in a plane crash in the Rocky Mountains. Uh, she was actually, for about a week of her life, she was the uh, most sought after person in the world for interviews because she survived this plane crash on Christmas Eve. Her husband died. Uh, 2 stepchildren and a business partner survived. So they were on the side of the mountain for 5 days. Uh, and so it's an incredible story. So I owe a great deal to my wife to having come to Missouri. Uh, we started a life here and we have children. We have 4 children and 13 grandchildren. And so we're just very blessed people. For a good portion of my life, I was running from God. He had called me when I was just 19 into missions and ministry. and I wanted no part of that. I'm like, are you serious? So I didn't really understand who he was or what he wanted from me. And so I was terrified, but I went to Bible school. I began to preach, and but still I wasn't comfortable with what is this missions thing, you know? And so I was running from it, even though I did some of the things on the outside, like go to Bible school. I began to pastor uh, two small churches in Carroll County. But my heart wasn't into it, you know? I had met him, I had an experience with him, but I just really wasn't for this, whatever it was. And so continued to run from him, and he eventually ran away from him and became, started riding bulls and rodeos and just things that I really thought were rebellious. I remember thinking those things. I don't want to do this God thing. And so I'm going to go totally opposite of what I thought God wanted me to do. Who was I? I was just Jim Harris, a little country boy from nowhere. I felt like, you had to be a great speaker, which if you come expecting me to be a great speaker, you'll be highly disappointed because we want the Holy Spirit to come and show up, because I am just a little country boy, and that's all I've ever been, even though God's put me on platform stages with thousands of people sometimes. So he's given me great opportunities. So now, I'm absolutely thrilled about what he's called me to do, but it was a long, long process. He called me when I was 19, gave me a vision. I saw this vision, and here I am in India, and I've prayed for a woman, and she's holding a baby. And so I never, thought really much about it. I just thought that was how God called me to come and work in missions. Well, it was 22 years later, I went on my first mission trip to India, and a woman ran down the road catching our, we left the area, and this woman comes running after our van, screaming and saying, I want someone in, I didn't know what she was saying, nobody did. But we got a translator, and she said, I want someone to pray for my baby. So I got out of the van, and I prayed for her and prayed for the baby, and it still didn't hit me until I got back in the van. And I realized the very thing that God had shown me 22 years ago had just happened. And so it was amazing. It was confirmation of what God wanted me to do. I want to share something with you as we begin, if I can find it here. Well, here we go. If you don't get anything else that I share with you this morning, capture this. Missions is not the ultimate goal of the church. Most missionaries would have you believe that. But truly, the great goal of the church is worship. Before time began, God had a dream. He had a dream about you, about me, about the world. And his dream was always to have a family. People that come and worship him voluntarily. Not because we're robots, and he could have made it that way. And how cool would that have been? Like, oh, I love you, God. Not because I have to. Oh, he's just like us. He wants his people to come worship him and love him freely. Without being made to do that. Missions exist because worship doesn't. We go to very difficult places. I've been to places where no outsider has ever been. I seek out those places to go preach, to share the gospel, and to help people with humanitarian aid. And which, by the way, your worship was awesome this morning. As you were having technical problems, I was thinking, oh, this is so good. Believe me, some of the places we go, there would be an Indian man beating on a drum, going, ah, and that's their worship. That sounded really good compared to some of the worship that we experience. And there'll be a dog running through, or a cow, or chickens always, and children, naked children running around. And it doesn't matter if there's 50 people or 500 or 5,000. That's pretty much the environment we're in. So when you come together and you have an opportunity like you did this morning to worship, how amazing, how awesome. So just always remember that not everybody, has those opportunities. We work with the persecuted church also. And those people come into a worship service and they sing without noise. They have no music, no instruments, no microphones, and they clap their hands like this and never make a sound. There could be 100 people in a very small room, and you won't, if you were standing outside, you would know one person was inside. So we are very blessed people. So don't take those things for granted. There was a great missionary named William Carey, and I'm going to read what he wrote. He was ready to leave as a missionary for India from England. And he told a group of interested friends, saving souls can be likened like a man that is drowning in a deep well. And a volunteer can do absolutely nothing to help unless he has people holding his ropes. He was saying, I will go down into that deep well, but I need rope holders. I can't go down and then back up, especially carrying this man or this woman. But I'll go if you will hold the ropes, if you will pull me back up, pull the person I'm holding back up, I'll go. And so what he was setting forth was a way for partners to help him throughout his ministry. And he had the most amazing ministry. And actually, he wrote the book that missionaries today are still using. I mean, even we pattern our ministry after this man 250 years ago. But prior to him, there were no missionaries. There were only people who were reaching their own community. If there was already a church established, they were doing evangelism, but there was no missions work. So Africa was lost. India was lost. Many of these great continents where there now are billions of people, they were all just going to perish and have no opportunity to know Jesus. So as he went to India, he was there for 40 years. He married and buried 3 wives, 6 children, but he translated, he lost 3 of his children, but he translated the Bible into 40 languages. Isn't that amazing? He had to learn it, put it in an alphabet of some kind, and then translated the Bible. And then he also changed laws in India. Like there was a law called sati. And this was, most women would marry an older man. And so when the man died, the law literally was, the law and the custom was when they buried the man, they didn't bury him, they burned him, they cremated him. And so when they cremated the husband, they would bring the wife and throw her on the funeral pyre. So he obviously didn't think that was a good thing. And so he began to work through the Congress and different things, the parliament in India, and eventually got a law passed that it was against the law to do this. Would you believe that even 250 years later, out in remote villages in India, that still happens? The thing is a woman is a liability for people there. They don't consider a woman as an asset. And so there was so much more than just a law. He was trying to establish that women are not a liability. They're an asset, And so he was so good for women. And he changed many laws. There was another law called infanticide. And now I'm talking 250 years ago. So don't get a bad taste in your mouth about India, okay? Because probably Americans had a lot of weird things that we did. But there was infanticide, and so if they had a child, they couldn't afford to take care of a child, or if it was a girl, many times they would just put the child out in the jungle and leave it there. I'm not going to go any further. But he made laws. He changed India. But the reason he was able to do that is he had great rope holders. He literally changed the continent as well as the world. And again, we honor him today, 250 years later, for being so bold and saying this, the world needs to know about Jesus. How can we have this treasure in this earthen vessel and not share it? How can we not want to go to the rooftop and shout it out? How awesome this Jesus is and what he's done for me. You know, God, as I shared with you, God had called me into ministry, and I just didn't think that was for me. I wasn't sure that I wanted to go that way. I was actually pretty sure I didn't want to do that. So as my wife and I moved back to Waverly from Houston, Texas, even when we met, we're like, we know God wants to do something in our lives. We had no idea. We weren't walking with God, but we felt there was something that he wanted to do in our lives. And so we moved back to Waverly, Missouri from Houston, Texas. I so honor my wife for making that move. Because I experienced culture shock, even myself, coming back, going from such a huge place to such a small place in the side of the road, And so anyway, we had children, and my wife began to take our children to church. And I'm like, I don't know that I want you doing that. At this point in my life, I was 35, almost 40 years old. I've been walking away from God for a long time. I'd become pretty professional at it. Yet every day, I would be thinking about those scriptures, about going and taking the gospel to the lost, and about helping the poor, those who have nothing. And so our ministry today, we go to people who have nothing. They may have a building they live in, but you go into the building and there is nothing. There's not a chair, there's not a table, there's, no beds, nothing. So God began to open my eyes to some of those things. I should back up. When we met, married, and went on our honeymoon, we ended up in Acapulco, Mexico. I had never been out of the country. I never wanted to leave Missouri, but I ended up in Texas and Kansas and some places where I was rodeoing and living a wild life. So we ended up in Mexico, and we lived for a week in this villa. We had people, cooking our food. It was so cheap. Even still, I think, wow, that was so cheap. But we'd been there for a week and lived like king and queen and just having a great time. And then the last day we're there, we're leaving, we're going to the airport. And we come down the mountain on the other side. Every time we'd gone down this side, and there was a beautiful view of Acapulco Bay, and wow, it was amazing. And so now this time we're going on this side of the mountain. And we're not 150 yards from where we've spent a week of bliss, and we're looking at people living in abject poverty. I mean, people living on the side of a mountain that goats couldn't go up. People are living there. They're raising their children there. And they have cardboard shacks, and just whatever they could find. And I began to weep. I told this is so weird. I'm about to cry right now. It was so weird. Why am I crying? But God was birthing something in me, in the passion and compassion for the people of the world. So we came back. We moved to Missouri, and my wife's taken our kids to church, and I'm like, I don't know that I like her doing that. I'm not really sure. I always believed in God. I just had a problem with religion. And so I wasn't sure that I wanted her doing that. And so I decided, well, I'm going to start going to church to protect my children. She can believe whatever she wants, but I'm going to protect my children because I've been to Bible school. Oh, so I go to church and been there a few Sundays, and this one particular Sunday, God touched my heart in a powerful way, like he had when he called me 20 some years earlier. But this time he reconfirms, and I just sensed that he was doing a powerful thing in my heart. And there was a lady there from Scotland. I could barely understand her. Her brogue was so heavy. And I don't hear real well. And so, but later there was a recording of what she said, and she said, "Today, sir, God's removing your broken, stony heart, and He's given His heart for the nations and the people." And so from that point on, it didn't matter what she said. God had done something in my heart. And so that day, I went from occasionally going to church, like 4 times a year, to like every Bible study they had, every time the church doors were open. As a matter of fact, I began to open the church doors. I was at church 6 or 7 days a week, and I just couldn't get enough. I'm like, and it wasn't so that I could go on and become a missionary or serve God. It was because I was hungry. It was because I wanted to know about this Jesus. I knew the book. I had studied the book, but I wanted to know the man. So God just kept doing things in our lives, and eventually we pastored a church for 3 years in Carrollton. We planted the church and pastored it for 3 years, and we loved it, and it was challenging. We learned so much, and then we felt like God was saying for us to move to St. Louis. Well, when He called me to start the church in Carrollton, prior to that, He was doing this missions thing in my heart. And He would call it, we would get a call because people knew we were interested in missions. And so people would call and say, "You want to go to Africa? We have an opening in Africa." And I'm like, "Yeah." And Pat would like, "We need to pray about that." Because this one group said, "Yeah, we know that you have a farm background and you raise cattle and horses. And so these people, the Fluani people, they're nomadic people, and they spend their whole life just following their cattle around. And we need people that'll be mobile and be able to go out and reach those people." And I'm like, "I'm in." My wife says, "I'm out." Because she couldn't go. She would have to just be like 500 miles from me in Africa. And then our daughter was going to be another 4-hour drive from her going to some kind of school. So anyway, in time, God spoke to me. "You can love," this is what I said to him, "I'll go anywhere as long as I can love the people just like my own people." And so in 2 to 3 days, every time, whether it was Asia, Africa, whether it was India or Bolivia or whatever the country was, every time God would say to me, "You can love those people through me." And so sure enough, I'd be at a mall 2 or 3 days later in Kansas City, and I'm like, "Wow, look at those Indian people over there. I'm going to go talk to them," And it was just like God did this thing in my life. And I'm like, I grew up in Waverly. There wasn't a person of color for miles. I didn't know anybody of color. So by osmosis or whatever, I was prejudiced. Didn't want to be, but I didn't know anything else. And so God was removing that, one people group after another and after another. And so finally, we were thinking we're ready to move to Asia or somewhere in the world as missionaries. And God said, "I want you to go to Carrollton, Missouri and plant a church." I'm like, "No way." That is the strangest mission field I've ever heard of. And so I was really angry with God. I'm like, "I don't want to do that." And finally, He just kept working with me and working with me. And then I said to Him, "Oh, I know I can love those people through you, right?" And this changed my life. He said, "No, I want to know if I can love them through you." It was a totally different way of looking at it. And I broke, and I'm like, whatever. I'm in. So we went and planted that church. If we hadn't done that, big part of our ministry now is we train people, black pastors, leaders, and we show them how to plant a church, how not to plant a church, And so we learned so much. And so had we not had that experience, how could we be doing what we're doing? And so just one experience after another that we had with the Lord that just brought us to where we are today. And we're still learning. I'm still the little country boy from Waverly, Missouri that God chose to use. Broken vessels. That's how we view ourselves. We're just broken vessels that He continues to pour in. We continue to leak out, and God is able to use us in spite of us. So many things I want to share with you. We went to India in 94, my wife, my daughter, and I. While we were there, we had an opportunity to go see the Taj Mahal. What an experience. We'd had this great experience there, and we're just about to leave the Taj Mahal area. And again, I'm just a country bumpkin. I don't know where I am. I thought the Taj Mahal was a restaurant or a hotel or something. I didn't know. I'm just being honest with you. And I was really surprised to find out it was a Muslim mausoleum. That blew me away. So here we'd had this great time. We'd seen this beautiful monument, and we're ready to leave. And God said, stop, look, tell me what you see. I'm literally in the gate, ready to step out of the Taj Mahal grounds. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, well, if I look back this way, I see the beautiful Taj Mahal and, the fountains and, everything nice. The grass was mowed, which never in India have I ever seen grass mowed. This was amazing. And so then I looked out the gate, and I'm like, well, Lord, this is what I see. There was a 4-year-old girl. She had gone over right there. She was from here to the piano from me, and she picked up this fresh cow manure. It's steaming. And she put it in a basket and put the basket on her head, and then she went over to her mother. The mother took the cow manure, mixed straw with it, and then they made like a pancake thing, and they put it up against a brick wall. And so I found 2 or 3 days later, they will come and they will just, a stick will pop that off the wall, and then they will use that for fertilizer. They can easily handle that, take it out, and throw it out in the farm field. Or they can burn it, which most food at that time in India was being prepared with that as a cooking source. So it really gives your breakfast a whole new aroma. So anyway, I just felt like, the Lord just kept dealing with me. I'm like, yeah, this is really kind of bad here. And I felt like he was saying, well, has anything changed? The Taj Mahal's been there maybe 400 years. Has anything changed around here? I'm like, I don't see any change. I think there have been hundreds of little girls right there picking up fresh cow manure. And the whole community, I'm thinking it looked just like it did 400 years before. And the Lord spoke to me, he said, don't let my church become like the Taj Mahal and only be relevant on the inside of the walls. Because many churches are that way. It's like what happens in here is wonderful, and when we hit the door, it's like quiet. We don't share that experience. And really, the experience of walking with Christ is out there. We just come here to be trained, encouraged. Later, I found out about the Taj Mahal that the man who built it, his wife, the legend is she was giving birth to their 14th child, and they knew she was going to die giving birth. And so she said to her husband, if you really love me, tell the world. And so she died. They buried her. For 20 years, he thought about, okay, how am I going to tell the world that I love my wife? So he came up with a plan to build the Taj Mahal, and he began to build it, and they would run into her bones, because they would just take her bones, and move them a little bit, and then they were expanding, and so then they would move her bones some more. And so ultimately, what happened was when they were ready to actually put her bones in the tomb, in the mausoleum, they could not find them. So isn't that odd? But I think sometimes that's the way we do church too. We really misplace the bones of Jesus, what he's really called us to be and do, to help the homeless, to help uh, children, to help, like we go to places where we give people their first set of clothes, not new clothes, but their first set of clothes, and help feed them and most importantly, of course, share the gospel with them. So as we made many more trips to Asia, we went to India and different places, um, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. And then in 2004, the tsunami hit Indonesia. It hit many places. You all know what I'm talking about, the tsunami of 2004. And so at that point, we were living in St. Louis. I had a full-time job, but we felt like it was time for us to launch into missions. It was time for us to go full-time and be missionaries. God called me when I was 19. I'm now 52. I wish I was 52 now, but I meant in the story, I'm telling you I was 52. Most people don't take that long, 33 years, to get to the mission field or to do anything. But that vision God had gave me had carried me all those years. And so January 1st, 2005, we made a decision. We're going to go full-time into missions work. We couldn't afford it. We had bills. It made no sense. Okay, none at all. I said, I'm buying a ticket. I'm going to go to Indonesia. And as long as we have funding coming in, I'm going to stay and I'm going to help people. Well, people had started calling us saying, we don't want to just send money over there. We want to send you. We want to send someone who's relevant, somebody that cares about the people. And because tons of money was flooding in, but there were also a lot of people that really didn't care about the people, and it was obvious. And so I went into that area and we helped thousands of people, and we preached the gospel quietly, subtly, because this was the first day there. The government came and got all the people like me doing humanitarian work, and they told us, we want you to come help the people, but you can't share the gospel. You share the gospel, and someone responds, we will kill them on the spot. We will scrape up their blood off the ground, and we will take their dead body and yours and their blood and take them out of this region. It was a state or a province. They were that adamant. So of course we didn't. All the humanitarian organizations, we all agreed that we would not do that. We would preach the gospel subtly. So we came up with the slogan, or I did, that St. Francis of Assisi said, preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words. In other words, it's a life that we live. It's the life that we live with our family, in our communities, and then, of course, if we have an opportunity to go out and be a great blessing to other people, God will use us. But we have to start in our communities and in our families. I meet a lot of people like, I want to become a missionary. I'm like, well, what are you doing? What do you mean? I'm like, would you give money to missions? Do you write to a missionary? Are you involved? Do you invite people to come to church? What? Like, yeah, you don't know what that is, do you? And they're like, no, but I want to go be a missionary. No, they want to go on a cultural experience is what they want. And so they don't really know what they're asking for. But anyway, through the years, God has so blessed us and prospered our work. And we are so thrilled. That which I was terrified of, now I dream. Every night I dream of how we can go help more people. Um, I'd love to come back and share with you more about our story and what God did in our lives. and now is allowing us to help so many other people. In Cambodia, we're helping, I think, feed about 1,800 children. We have 60 churches planted, and in India we have 600 people with leprosy, and we're planting churches there, and in Nepal, and different things. It's like I say, it's not us. It's only the fact that we're willing to go, and he'll use you. And so I'm saying that to you all. You don't have to be the best preacher. You don't have to have all the things in a row how to witness someone. Just live your life. Acknowledge Jesus in front of them. Say, hey, come to church with me. We got a great pastor. We got a great church. We got great worship. I guarantee you the worship we had here is better than any bar in town. Believe me, I used to go to a lot of bars. Anyway, I thank you for the opportunity to come share with you. I have so much I wanted to share with you. Didn't even get the introduction done, okay? So anyway, just as I'm closing, I had one more thought. Do I have time? This was a powerful thought. A few years ago, my wife and I, it was about Christmas time, and we're driving down the road in St. Louis. And I've driven, I don't know, probably close to 2 million miles in my lifetime. So I'm a guy, and I think I'm a great driver. Okay. And so we're driving down the road, and I'm gonna go into the left lane on the freeway. We're driving down the road, I'm just gonna come over, and I hear, "Argh!" And I look up, and there's a transport truck there, red, big red and white transport truck, 60 feet long. So I jerk, the car back and get back in my lane, and I look at my wife, and she's like giving me one of those looks, like, you didn't see that? How could you not see that? It's right there, it's red and white, it's big. So it went on down the road as my heart is, trying to recover, and she wasn't very happy with me for some reason. I think she thought I was trying to kill us, I'm being hard on her. Actually, I was really hard on myself because I'm like, how could I not have seen that? How is it possible? And so I begin to think about that. And I begin to think about my life and how I lived my life, not thinking about the gospel, not thinking about the poor and the needy, not thinking about sharing the gospel and reaching the lost. Yet, I grew up in a little Baptist church in Waverly, Missouri. And every service, we were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. If they had a prayer meeting, we were there. Every time I was at church, they talked about helping the poor and reaching the lost. And I began to go on a journey thinking, how could I have been so blind? That transport truck was right there, yet I didn't see it. And this whole book is filled with helping people, the orphans, the widows, and reaching the lost. And I knew it. But how could I have been so blind? What was it that made me be so blind? The truck, it was obvious. I just didn't see it. But as you read this, how do we not see it? And sometimes we just really don't see it. And other times it's an inconvenience. And for me, as I've looked back on my life, I think for me, it was an inconvenience. Because I wanted that money. I mean, why should I send money to children overseas? My children can use that. Why should we help missionaries go over there and preach the gospel? There's people in America that need to hear the gospel. I hear that all the time, which is quite true. but that's your job. I still need to go. You know what I mean? God's calling this church, I believe, He's putting a calling specifically on this church for people to love Him unconditionally. And that's what I didn't do for years. I loved Him as long as He could put some change in my pocket, as long as He could heal me when I was sick, as long as He was doing things for me. But I was so blind. The greatest privilege that we've had in our life is going to Asia, going to South America, going to the world and talking about Jesus and how much He loves us and what He's done for us. Amen.